Hello and welcome back to Knoxville. I'm Ryan Sylvia. This is Noah Taylor. We're with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network. And Tennessee basketball just welcomed in what was considered by many kind of rankings and different analytics to be the #1 offense in the country in Alabama. But the Vols had no issue. A 20-point win, final score, Tennessee 91, Alabama 71. And a big deal in this game, a big difference maker, was the difference in turnovers. What was your thoughts not only about Tennessee's defense and what they did to produce these turnovers, but also how they protected the ball when they had it?
Yeah, I mean, 22 turnovers, a season high for Alabama, and really the tone was set in the first 6 minutes. Tennessee forced 6 turnovers in there in that span, and really Alabama never recovered from that. And then you look at it, I mean, it wasn't a whole lot of Alabama just doing dumb things and throwing the ball away. You know, Tennessee was like Nate Oates said, kind of in their face, you know, and making it really tough on them. I mean, you look at the box score, and Zakai Ziegler leads the way with 4 steals. There's 16 total steals. You have multiple guys who finish with 3. Jemiah Mashack being one of those guys, Jordan Gainey with 3, and then Vescovy and Josiah-Jordan James get 2 each. So it wasn't that Alabama was just making dumb mistakes. It was that Tennessee was making it very difficult for them on the offensive end. And then conversely, like you said, Tennessee was taking care of the ball really well, which is a recipe for disaster for Alabama, and obviously leads to really good things for Tennessee.
And this is going up against one of the guys in the running for SEC Player of the Year, Mark Sears. He gets over his 19-point mark he set this season. He's going to finish the game with 22. But what stands out is his 7 turnovers. And a lot of those points kind of came late in the game when it was out of reach. Tennessee did a really good job of not letting him get to his spots, not letting him get clean looks off, and then making him fork the ball up. The guys on him all game, Jemiah Mashack, Zakai Ziegler, what did you think about their efforts in one of their biggest tasks of the season and how they came through in it?
Yeah, I think, going back to Nate Oates, he goes back there in that post-game press conference and says it right away. That Tennessee was tougher, that Tennessee was just the better team. They played harder. And guys he mentioned specifically were Jemiah Mashack and Zakai Ziegler. And it's kind of interesting to hear it from an opposing coach's perspective because we're, here several times a week. We see this team, we've seen it for the last couple of years, how good these guys are defensively. Obviously, that's the brand that Rick Barnes puts on the court. But those 2 guys, 2 of the best defenders in the league. And hearing Nate Oates say it, you can't prepare for it because you can't really replicate it in practice. You don't have a guy that's as quick and as effective as Jemiah Mashack or Zakai Ziegler. And it just really speaks to what Tennessee has, the value those 2 guys bring. But it's one of those things that Nate Oates said, our guys kind of have to learn it as they're playing against it because you can't do it in practice. I think that was evident today. Mark Sears, a guy you mentioned, had a lot of success, SEC Player of the Year candidate, and just does get, leads Alabama in scoring, but Tennessee gives them a really, really hard afternoon. 7 turnovers, like you mentioned, and he was not able to be effective as he's been this season. And Jemiah Mashack's a big reason why.
Yeah, 7 turnovers going to match the team mark that Tennessee gave up. So I think that tells a lot of the story of how this ended up being a 20-point win here at home for Tennessee. A really positive thing to see, though, on both ends, but especially on the offensive end of the floor, was Jordan Gainey kind of re-emerging. Really, really rough start for him. Through the first 4 SEC games, he made just 1 shot for 3 points. He was averaging 0.8 points per game in that stretch, shooting 9.1% from the field. Well, very quickly tonight, he hit that first 3-pointer, and it felt like maybe the floodgates began to open for him. His final stat line in 21 minutes of play, which is also of note because he's kind of struggling to stay on the floor, he's going to put up 4 for 7 shooting, 3 for 5 from deep, 4 for 4 at the free throw line for 15 points. 3 steals on the defensive end was also great to see. Tosses in an assist with just 1 turnover and comes down with 5 rebounds as well. So Jordan Gainey getting back in the rhythm, starting to hit on some shots, some 3-pointers, and also probably his best defensive performance of the year for him as well is a great sign, especially when you're in the first half and Santiago Vescovy is in foul trouble, has to sit for extended minutes. The natural next step is to look to Jordan Gainey, and he came through in a big way, I think, for Tennessee. Who else stood out to you, though? Was there anyone else on the offensive end that kind of caught your eye today and helped reach that 91-point mark, which is a pretty substantial number for an SEC opponent?
Well, I think you got to mention Jonas Aidoo having another really good game, 19 points, finishes second in scoring, doesn't get that double-double. It seems like we're kind of expecting that out of him now every time he touches the floor, but a guy that had a lot of success against this Alabama team last year, which ended up winning the SEC regular season and tournament as well. He played really well against that Alabama team. Comes out, does it again today. Like I mentioned, 19 points. But some of the younger guys too, like Freddie Dilion, comes out. I think he finished with 6 points in this game in less than 5 minutes. But played really well. A guy that Rick Barnes, can you say he put in some good minutes against Florida earlier this week as well, but a guy that Rick Barnes is continuing to say he's starting to get it. He's starting to get better and better, and you're seeing that again. Played a little bit less than 5 minutes, but I think was very effective. I think the sequence in the game that kind of gets lost because so many other guys so many great things was there in the first half when Alabama's trying to get into it. Of course, they're playing from behind the whole game, but Freddie gets a ball stripped away from him on the offensive end and sticks with it, goes down here and does the same exact thing and leads to a transition dunk for Dalton Connect, and this place just went crazy, which it did all afternoon, but specifically in that moment. So a guy that, like Rick Barnes said, is really starting to get it, getting better. I think he made the most of his minutes out there tonight.
Now, before we get out of here, we do have to talk about Dalton Connect, right? Felt like maybe a quiet night for him in some ways. Definitely cooled down in the second half, just in terms of they didn't necessarily need him. Nate Oates kind of joked. He was like, I think this game was close. He probably goes over 35 again. They just didn't need him to. But you have to talk about what Dalton Connect did. Leads the team in scoring with 25 points, 8 for 20 shooting, 1 for 6 from deep. He did a lot at the rim though, right? So 1 for 6 shooting from 3, 8 for 10 still not, or 8 for 20 still not crazy efficient. But when he was at the rim, it felt like he did a lot of good things. You mentioned the transition dunk. He had a couple of those. So it was a game where he wasn't hitting the contested threes. He wasn't doing necessarily that like we saw in the last few games, but he was still really effective. And he tosses in 2 assists as well, just 1 turnover, plus minus a plus 19. So a really good game from Dalton Connect. It's tough to go a Tennessee basketball game this year without talking about what he's been able to do on the offensive end. Next up, though, for Tennessee, a trip to play Vanderbilt on Saturday. They have a bye in the middle of the week. Rick Barnes talked about how they're going to use that to look at those young players that you mentioned, like a Freddie Dilion, JP Estrella getting some run tonight. Cam Carr and Cade Phillips didn't play, but Rick Barnes talked about how he's seen the improvement with them as well. One thing I thought was interesting, he said, with these young guys, we tell them by the end of January, we can kind of tell if you're going to get it or not. We can kind of tell if you're going to stick or if we need to look somewhere else. And he's had those conversations with them where it's up to you to decide what we do with the recruiting for next year to figure what we need, because we need to figure out if you're going to be able to give us the minutes that we want to see. So something to see looking forward, how those guys respond to a week that's going to be pretty dedicated on them before they head to Nashville, face Vanderbilt. We'll be there though. We're going to head to Nashville, so make sure you head to VolReport.com for all of our coverage leading up to that game and on game day. Lady Vols, we back Pack game tomorrow. Make sure you go to VolReport.com for updates on that as well. Football recruiting heating up. George McIntyre making a commitment on Monday between Tennessee and Alabama. So we have everything covered that you could possibly want over at VolReport.com. Links to everything you need is in the description. Thank you for watching.